Top 10 reasons for Easter? Outsourcing power and salvation to a superhuman is way easier than taking personal responsibility. Human beings seek saviors, and Jesus was a very viable candidate. Chocolate is godly, and sugar addictions are celebrated. Jesus taught freedom and knowledge of self in a time of oppression. He walked the hero's journey. Fabulous hats in some communities. Jesus rose from the dead after a violent crucifixion and 3 days of being in a tomb. High drama, happy ending. We love that. Pagan rituals and traditions, cute bunnies, baby chicks. Opportunity to die to the small self and be reborn to the greater self. A reminder that death is not real. And a transition in consciousness from physical being to spiritual being. And that is really what we stand to be about here. To rise up into a higher idea of who you are and what you are. To transcend the realm of circumstance and condition and acknowledge your divinity. That's what this place exists to be about. So you could be anywhere on Easter Sunday. And in my opinion, we've pretty much gotten the story twisted. What we've done is we've said, you're fundamentally bad and wrong. Thank God this guy came to save your behind. And now you're going to spend the rest of your life outsourcing your power, approval, security, and control to a deity, and hopefully you'll be redeemed somewhere in the future. I have a friend who had open heart surgery this past week, and he's a devout Catholic, and he loves to run the shame tape. Is anybody familiar with the shame tape? I'm bad and wrong. Something's wrong over here. Maybe you can know. Maybe you can help me. Something's definitely wrong over here. And I said, such good news, beloved. The open heart surgery is on Wednesday. You miss Good Friday. This is good news for you. You don't need to keep running that tape. So we can't talk about Easter unless we also talk about this thing called Good Friday. And there's an AME pastor that I follow on Twitter, and on Good Friday, he posted this. Good Friday, the day we remember when the state executed another brown-skinned human by a corrupt system that produced a corrupt verdict. So as much as we would love to jump to redemption, you can't redeem if you don't get the fall. And that's sort of the basic premise of many traditional world religions, a fall and redemption theology. There's a sort of baked-in requirement that you will fall over and over and over again, which I would agree with in your evolutionary journey. Where I would differ is in this notion that you're fundamentally okay, you're good, you're whole, you're holy. There's nothing to redeem. I was so appreciative of the context that he created on Friday, because we always have to look at these things from a historical perspective and a spiritual perspective. Jesus was a radical. I know it's fun to present him as blonde hair, blue-eyed, little lamb. But it turns out he was a Palestinian rabbi who was for sure a holy disruptor and super inconvenient to the Roman Empire. And his butt got killed because of it. So I retweeted, and when that human said, "There is an aspect of me you will never hurt, harm, or hinder." See, Good Friday was a result of a fear-based paradigm. Someone was speaking truth to power. And if you're living in a consciousness of fear, you have to wipe that thing out because it's too scary. And so he was taken out, as many great mystics have been. We are at a time in the evolution of humanity where there is a calling from the soul of humanity to birth a new order, a new world, a new reformation. And what that requires is for each of us to step into our personal power, to our divinity. The big idea of Jesus was he got that he is the I am presence. You know, so oftentimes we hear these scriptures thrown around that he would say, "I am the way." And an adolescent interpretation of that misunderstood it and thought that it had to do with Jesus. When, in fact, Scripture has always been intended to be poetry. The I am presence predated Jesus by a very long time. The I am presence metaphysically means your spiritual nature. So when he said, "I am the way," he was saying your spiritual nature is the way. This world of form nonsense, of fear, of separation, of segregation, of violation, is not your spiritual nature. See, there are the facts. There is a story that we write about the facts, and then there's the truth. And you got to understand what each of those things are. The facts are that a brown-skinned Palestinian rabbi was executed for speaking a liberation philosophy. That is the fact of what happened. Then lots of people co-opted that story and wrote versions of it to affirm their positions in society. And then there's the truth. The truth is that you are a spiritual being having a human experience. And when we forget that we are first and foremost spiritual expressions of all that is the God body in form, when we forget that, we create separation, we make folks the other, and we execute them. We are living in a time where predictably you have a 22-year-old young father who was executed for being a black man in his grandmother's backyard. 6 shots to the back. The first one was deadly. The second one was deadly. The third one was deadly. The fourth one was deadly. The fifth one was deadly. The sixth one was deadly. Those are the times we're living in. We are living in a time where your beingness, not your doingness, your beingness can be executed. We are entrenched in a trance of fear and separation. And this community exists to disrupt in service of the sacred. So let me break down what we mean when we say Holy Disruptor. The word holy means devotion to the service of God. Disruptor is a person who breaks apart the normal course. Now I want to share the definition of God that we use here, because if that word triggers you, I want to give you a little space. The word God, as we understand it here, is the indwelling presence, the life force energy in back of all things, the unseen, the infinite. If you don't prefer that word, you can substitute that word with consciousness, universe, spirit, divine, life, source. It goes by many names. A holy disruptor is a person who breaks apart norms in service of the sacred. A person who breaks apart norms in service of God. A person who breaks apart norms in service of love. That's who and what Jesus was. He saw that the state was occupying a particular place and space and working at the level of mind control. Very ancient tradition in human beings. And Jesus said, hold up. I am suggesting that we disrupt the paradigm of fear and liberate the consciousness of love. And when we are asleep, that feels very threatening. So in The Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes says it like this: while bondage is an experience, there is a reality to which bondage is not real. Pay attention to the word reality here being capitalized, the word real being lowercase. While bondage is an experience, there is a reality to which bondage is not real. To that reality, bondage is not even an illusion or hallucination. There is a part of us that is never fooled. That is why, in the midst of the greatest trial, death, or any human suffering, something rises from within and says with Job, though I die, yet shall I live. You know, what I so appreciate about that text, and where I think the New Thought community is always on its growth edge, or the spiritual but not religious community is always on its growth edge, is it very clearly states bondage is real. It's an experience. It's occurring. So it doesn't work to say this is all just a figment of your imagination. And if you really got your high and holy self, this would not be occurring. Now, in some way that is true, but we are living in a three-dimensional reality. Stefan Clark actually got executed in his grandmother's backyard. And when you get shot from the back, you're not posing any kind of threat, right? So who you're being is a threat in the consciousness of those who have executed you. That is a parasite in the consciousness of humanity. And this community stands to be a holy disruption to the consciousness of fear, to the consciousness of lack, to the consciousness of limitation, to the consciousness of scarcity. And until this country is willing to have a meaningful, comprehensive conversation about our virus of separation, it will spread. Now, the good news is, it's not the truth. And as a brilliant theologian long before the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King came along said, the moral arc of the universe is long, always bends towards justice. It's long, and it does bend towards justice. That does not absolve us of personal responsibility. No one is coming to save. You're it. You're it. most frequently I find when this conversation feels confronting, it is because we are feeling defensive. And when we are feeling defensive, we are beginning to take something personally. And when we are beginning to take something personally, we are digging our heels in on the lie of separation. So could it be that there is bondage occurring on the planet, and it doesn't have to be the truth, but it's real important that we look at it? It's real important that we look at the consciousness of humanity, the virus of separation, and disrupt fear. Not for the sake of disruption, but because we are on an evolutionary trajectory. So, mystical activists have always known this. Jesus was a mystical activist. He was a guy that said, look beyond appearances. I imagine that Jesus had like a I don't imagine Jesus as like meek, and that is not my Jesus. The Jesus that I identify with was like, "Meh." And he was like in people's face with a fierce presence, and he was like, tell me that I am not the I am. Tell me that I am not the God made manifest. But if we subscribe to that Jesus on a societal level, y'all be too free. And we don't want you to be too free, because then you could get all riled up. We don't want you to get all riled up, because then we feel threatened. And if we feel threatened, then I got to start grabbing mine and protecting it, because you're about to come get it. Pa-pow, 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 pa-pow. And then you shoot folks down because you're scared. Got to be real. That's the time we're living in. And until we have that conversation, we will continue to stay asleep. So Ernest Holmes goes on to say, the Christ, not the guy's last name, always have to remember that. The Christ existed as a context long before Jesus of Nazareth came on the scene. The Christ triumphs over death and the grave, breaking through the tomb of human limitation into the dawn of eternal expansion. The Christ rises from the ashes of human hopes, pointing the way to a greater realization of life. The Christ places his hand in the outstretched hand of the universe and walks unafraid through life. Jesus walked unafraid through life because he identified with his spiritual nature over his human self. So he walked through circumstances and conditions and said, like that. See, I don't know. I am like at home acting out Bible scriptures. Something's coming up. You have to take a class to hear the unedited Lola. I love this idea of Lola Christ. Really, of Quincy Christ. Of Jeffrey Christ. Rosa Christ. Because as one of my favorite quotes, you've heard me say so many times before, from Jesus and the Disinherited, Howard Thurman, a great American Christian mystic, said Jesus held the crown above the woman's head, and she rose up into the high idea of her. Imagine that the Christed one in you, your higher self, is standing above your head in every moment. Say, come on, rise up. Right, don't get seduced. It's not real. Rise up. See, in these times, we can get real cynical. It's very easy to get fatigued and tired if you are paying attention to any facts in the media. Not because they're not real, lowercase r. I think it's very important to be sober about what's happening on the planet. Young people across this country are disrupting our comfort. Thank God. And when the Sacramento police, in the wake of an execution, drive over a 60-plus-year-old woman who's marching as a holy disruptor, we got a problem. The good news is that you are the light of the world. The good news is that in any moment, we can awaken to the divine presence that is right where we are. That was the invitation Jesus extended. I am the light of the world. He didn't say Jesus is the light of the world. He said, I am the light of the world. You know, there are all kinds of Bible scriptures that we don't take literally, but we have a select few we love to take literally. Devil, get ye behind me. That's a metaphor. Get your mind right. Get your unclean thinking behind you and move forward. Do you think they thought there was a red man running around? Of course not. Nobody thinks that. So why do we think that when he said, I am the light of the world, we thought he meant him? No. Moses was talking about the I am presence in the Hebrew Bible. I am the light of the world. Say that. I am the light of the world. I am the light of the world. You are here to light up the world. You are here to disrupt spaces of fear and call forward the sacred, to invite an awareness of the atmosphere of God. Ernest Holmes goes on to say, a mystic is not a mysterious person, but is one who has a deep inner sense of life and of his unity with the whole. There is nothing mysterious in the truth, so far as it is understood. But all things seem mysterious until we understand them. The mystic does not read human thought, but rather he senses the atmosphere of God. One of my greatest challenges is my impatience with folks' small stories about themselves. There is some payoff that humanity gets in self-loathing. Otherwise, we wouldn't keep doing it. This community does not exist to co-sign one another's self-loathing. This community, the place you chose to come to on a Sunday morning that is the celebration of Easter, This place stands to be a reminder of your wholeness, of your holiness, so that you can step into it and walk into the world and offer that invitation to every person you meet. The concept of resurrection means rising from a belief in death. There are things in all of our lives that are dying. Relationships, loved ones, financial experiences, jobs, they're dying. That just means something is ending. But life is eternal. That is the spiritual principle of Easter. Life is eternal. So rise up. Don't get caught down here. This doesn't move anything forward. Look at it, see it, notice it, and then rise up and move forward. You're here to provoke the atmosphere of God, an awareness of the atmosphere of God, an awareness of our oneness. The notion that we are separate from our source is the place and space where suffering lives, and it is the invitation to hurt and harm other folks. So we're going to talk Holy Disruption this month. We're going to talk about who you are as a human being at this time in history, to deconstruct what no longer works in our systems and society and call forward a new thought about what could be possible. I hope that you'll join me in that. Happy Passover. Happy Easter.